So tonight our speaker is Chris Cassidy. He's a graduate of the United States Naval Academy class of 1993, which makes him really young because I was commissioned in 1968 and I retired in 1993. And he spent 10 years in Navy as a SEAL, besides deploying to Afghanistan and the Mediterranean. He was a SEAL delivery team leader. SEAL delivery team vehicle leader. For those of you who don't know, that's a mini submarine that goes on the back of a regular submarine, and the SEALs get into the submarine and then go off and do their business, and then hopefully they find the submarine again when they want to return. Anyway, he wasn't satisfied being a SEAL, so he applied to become an astronaut and was selected in 2004. He flew on STS-127. That's the space shuttle. And he rode Soyuz capsules to and from the space station and for expeditions 35, 36, and 62, 63. And besides spending a lot of time on the space station, what's amazing to me is he spent 54 hours and 51 minutes in space on spacewalks. Now, imagine stepping out of the space station and there's nothing there. Anyway, so please welcome my friend Chris Cassidy, who is also the president of the National Medal of Honor Museum.
Appreciate it. Let's just go with that and describe for a second what it's like to do a spacewalk, because the first time that I saw a hand reach out and grab a handrail with the earth behind it and realized, holy cow, it's my hand, it actually got my attention quite a bit. So spacewalks are normally 6.5 hours, 6 hours long, and it's quite a process to get the suit on and get oxygen pressures right and get out the door. And so by the time you actually are there and the pressure starts decreasing and you're ready to go, you've been in the suit already for 5 hours, and then you've got another 6 more to go. So it's a long day. But the normal pressure that we're hitting right now here is about 14.7 or so, and then we start decreasing the airlock. And my mentor and guide for my very first spacewalk, he said, right before we closed our visors, he goes, when the pressure gets below 2.0, that's the death zone, and then the visors close. I'm like, what the heck? Why do you say that? But and so that's the truth. The gauge starts going down. When you get to about 5 pounds of pressure, you're at equivalent altitude of about Mount Everest, and you need that. Therefore, we breathe pure oxygen, just like most people breathe pure oxygen who climb those high mountaintops. And then the pressure keeps on decreasing. Get to that 2 pounds of pressure, 2.0 on your gauge, and that's when the suit really is the thing keeping you alive, and the pressure keeps on going down. It gets to 0. And that's when you hear somebody in the radio from Houston saying, okay, guys, you have a go to open the hatch. And first time, as I said, I saw my hand reach out and crank the handrail. And there's a funny story about that, because the guy that said, hey, don't remember, 2.0 is the death zone, Dave Wolf, there's 2 positions in the airlock. There's the switch person, which he was, and their head is inboard, and there's the hatch person, which I was that day, who actually manipulates the hatch and exits out the spacecraft. And they said, okay, you have a go to open the hatch. And that was my cue, hand on the handrail, crank it open, lift it up. But the pumps aren't enough to get every little last puff of air out of the airlock. So you have to give it a little oomph to get the hatch off the seal. And right as I did that, there was a straw, like a drink straw from the trash can that had floated out of the trash can earlier in the day, had been with us in the airlock for 5 hours, we didn't notice it. And right at that moment, it was right there by my head. And as the hatch came off the seal, that last puff of air sucked the straw out, and the straw went disappearing down into the clouds below, 250 miles below, as Earth was going by at 5 miles a second, and there disappeared the straw. And that straw froze me in my tracks. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be that straw. It was probably 30 or 40 seconds, maybe a minute, where I kind of froze and then realized, okay, got to get on with life and get out there and start. But to Mark's point, it can really get your attention. And what we tell new spacewalkers on their very first time, we build into the timeline 10 minutes of adaptation where things just like the straw, where you get out there, you just settle down, you let your heart rate go down. We tell people wiggle your toes because that helps a lot. You can't wiggle your toes if you're tense, and just kind of settle in and then get on with the day. And it's a big series of procedures, and you rehearse them in those procedures have been rehearsed in the pool in Houston and then sent up to you, and you've most people that have an aviation background, you've heard the term chair fly. We chair fly a spacewalk through and through until you actually are out there doing it, and off you go, and you perform these series of activities throughout the 6 hours, and you come back in. There's nothing else that makes you feel more like an astronaut than spacewalking. Astronauts, even on the space station, we have email and meetings and Zoom calls, all the normal boring stuff that every work has, but there's no replacing a spacewalk. It's an unbelievable experience, and something that you really feel pretty proud of to do, because the reason you're doing it is to repair something broken or install new capability on the space station and upgrade the system, so to speak. So spacewalks are quite something. But as that happened, I remember thinking on one instance in my last mission in 2020, Mark mentioned I've flown in space 3 times, once on the shuttle in 2009 on my first mission. Space shuttles are limited to 2 weeks long. We call those short duration missions. They are limited in length by how much oxygen we can put in the shuttle. We went to the station and we helped construct it on our particular mission. We brought equipment and parts to it to make the space station bigger. But you leave after 2 weeks. And then my second and third missions were both 6 months long. I stayed on the station the whole time. So total of my life about a year up there. Unbelievable experiences. I'm often asked what's the difference between those 2 types of missions. In very simple terms, on the shuttle, the short duration missions, it's very much like you and your family rent an Airbnb house somewhere where you're going to go, and you enjoy everything that it has to offer. You enjoy the amazing views. You enjoy the sandy beach right out the door. You don't really care how the hot water heater works. You don't care how the cables are laid to the TV screen. You just want everything to work. And if it doesn't work, you call somebody and say, this thing doesn't work. Whereas when you stay there for 6 months, you are the owner. All of a sudden, what I noticed and felt really proud about is you could float by something and hear a noise and hear something that just didn't sound right. You cared how every single cable was laid out because it affected your daily life. And you cared where the hammer was stored, and if it wasn't stored back in its spot, you policed each other up. So really quite something to stay, even though 6 months sounds like an awfully long time, and it is, you're ready to come back. The sense of satisfaction, the sense of personal pride, the sense of teamwork and community and esprit de corps that exists between a crew that's up there for 6 months is something that you really can't replace. It's quite something. So because a lot of us here have military background, and what I love about the military is everyone had a path to get into it. And it took us in all different places, and mine went one way, and some of these gentlemen and ladies haven't had their start yet, and back there too. But it'll take you someplace that leads to cool, amazing experiences. And when I was a senior in high school, I just want to take a quick few minutes and talk about this, because it's really fundamental to who I am, is the path to military service, because it wasn't something that I thought about when I was a kid. I grew up in a small town in Maine, and at some point in junior or senior year realized that, this college thing, you got to actually pay for it. Somebody's got to pay for it. It's a thing. And I remember looking at different options, and most of you remember the guidance counselor's office, where you open up books and you look at it and you kind of pick your college that means something to you. And I found the Naval Academy, and I loved the way the people looked and the buildings looked, and I thought that is my place. And I also read that at the bottom it said it's free to go here, and it also said you got to apply to the congressman. So like a good senior in high school, I applied to the congressman's office. I went to the interview. The person said, good job, we'll take it from here. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I've applied to the United States Naval Academy. Fall of my senior year. Some of you have heard this story before, excuse me, but it's fundamental, as I mentioned, to me. So it's the fall of my senior year in high school. Fast forward to the spring of my senior year in high school. Everybody's finding out if they're in or not to schools. And I was getting that from other schools, but nothing from the Naval Academy. Finally, I called the admissions office and asked them if you could help me. And the very friendly person said, sure, I got you. Tell me your name. I tell her my name. Can you spell it for me? I hear rummaging through files. What's your social security number? More files. I'm sorry, we've got nothing on you. You effectively didn't apply to this school. And so that was the late in my senior year, as I mentioned. But luck, divine intervention, whatever you believe in, the very next week, my friend and I had planned to join his father on a business trip to Washington, D.C. from our hometown in Maine during our spring break, and we did exactly that. The only difference was one of those days I took an afternoon and went over to the Naval Academy and walked into the admissions office, and the person said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm the guy. I have a question about my application. She said, oh, you're the young man from Maine. I'll help you out. You need to see Captain Malillo, Marine Corps captain, third door on the right down there. You can't miss him. And people in this room know what stereotypical Marine Corps representatives look like. Rigid as a board, shoes you can see reflection in, square jaw, haircut, the whole 9 yards. That's what this guy was. I turned the corner. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into? And I knew, I was pretty intimidated, but I knew that this was my chance. I had to share my story with him. So I tell him what happened. Total time in his office is 5 or 6 minutes or so, tops. And he nodded a little bit and said, okay, I'll get back to you. And that was about it. The whole trip back to New England from D.C., I thought, well, at least I can sleep well at night. I gave it my best shot, but it's not in my cards to go to the United States Naval Academy. I need to think of something different to do. A couple days later, I'm in class. I get paged to the main office for a phone call, and it's him. He said, hey, Cassidy, it's Captain Malillo. I got good news. I can get you into the Navy prep school, but I need an answer right now on the phone if you're in or not. I didn't know what the prep school was, where it was, what it meant, what the impact to me as a person was, but I knew that this was a door open or closed, and what side of the door do I want to be on? Yes, sir, I'm in. Thank you very much. It turns out, if it wasn't for Captain Malillo, for some reason, believing in young me, for some whatever thing he did that day, I fundamentally believe I wouldn't be here tonight talking to you guys. Because of him, because of somebody that believed in a young person, I got an opportunity to go to the prep school, which was 1 year in Newport, Rhode Island. If you maintain certain grades, you automatically get to Annapolis. While I was there, I met my first Navy SEAL person who inspired me and motivated me to try that as a career path. While I was in the SEAL teams, I met Bill Shepard, who was the very first Navy SEAL to become an astronaut. And he mentored me, guided me, and inspired me to try that as an option for career. And it worked out. And 3 space flights later, and a couple years at the Medal of Honor Museum, I'm here tonight to share those stories with you, all because Captain Malillo gave me an opportunity that he didn't know me, he didn't know who I was, but he gave it to me. And I love to share that story because I'm so thankful for him as a person, and all of us in this room, and I think this briefing series has the opportunity we can be Captain Malillo for these young people in the background, and maybe you have your own similar story. So I always give a little shout out to Captain Malillo every time I have the opportunity. So it was that path that led me 11 years in the SEAL teams, and then the time at NASA, and I'm happy to answer any questions about any of that stuff. There's lots of stories to be told there. I'll share just a couple to kind of whet your appetite, and then you can ask me questions later. I'm often asked, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going through your head on launch day? And how do you process all that? You actually back up launch day a little bit. You come together as a crew, much like a military unit who's going on deployment. You train as a unit for about a year or whatever, year and a half. We do the same thing at NASA. We train as a crew, and then mostly in Houston for the shuttle. It's all in Houston. Other missions to the space station, it's more international, where you train a lot in Russia and through that process, I've got to know all the Russian cosmonauts and many of the people in their space program. Japan, Europe, we train in Germany, and then in Canada as well. So it's a very international, quite flavor. But you come together, you do that training, you do that preparation, and then you fly on your mission. So it's quite a process. And how do you feel about launch day? So you back that up about a year and a half. You go through all that training, and then you go into quarantine about 2 weeks before launch. By the way, astronauts knew what quarantine meant long before y'all did. And then a week before launch, we leave Houston, we go to Florida. We go to the same exact suit room, the same exact quarantine facility that Neil and Buzz and Apollo and Mercury guys did. Amazing history there. It's really cool to just be in the building, sleep in the same rooms, and just kind of soak it all in. A couple days before launch, your friends and family descend upon Houston or Florida, and now the excitement, it starts to amp up. Your phone and email starts to explode a little bit, so you're really starting to feel the energy and the momentum towards launch. And then it becomes the last night before you launch, and you have this like fitful, restless night of sleep, and thinking about all kinds of things. What do you have to do on the mission? Are you going to screw it up? Do I know everything I need to know? All these thoughts. And then you wake up the next morning, there's a little piece of paper under the door that says, okay, here's your instructions. And astronauts are very procedure people and rule followers, and the instructions say, pack this little duffel bag, it's going to Edwards Air Force Base in case you land there, you got something to wear. Pass this little duffel bag, it's going to meet you at the shuttle landing strip here in Florida. This is your primary bag that you're going to put on when you land. Pack your big bags, they're all going back to your house in Houston. Cell phone, wallet, keys, put them in this Ziploc bag. And next thing you know, you're staying there and your whole life is packed up. You just got your gym shorts on and your clothes, or your gym clothes, and everything else is done. And now it's time to, we've got a little bit of time to ourselves, because launch day, the launch time is always scheduled for about 4 p.m. in your duty day. Doesn't mean it's 4 o'clock on your watch. It's, we just adjust our sleep and wake cycles such that you have that much time until you're ready to go. You've got a few hours to just kind of kill, do a little run, do a workout, read books, whatever you want to do, and then you go in for your last meal, which is lunch, and it's a very lousy name for your final meal before a space flight. But you go to that lunch, and you come out of lunch and you go to the suit room. And the suit room is this place where there's 7 seats for the shuttle. There's 7 crew members. Each crew member has a seat, and you're assigned a suit technician whose job it is to get you dressed and make sure you got all your gear squared away. On a normal training day, there's a lot of banter and joking and kind of fun atmosphere as everybody's getting ready for that training session. But what I noticed instantly on launch day, the vibe was absolutely stone cold serious. And as the suit was coming on, the suit technician who I'd been working with for a year and had a good relationship with, he didn't even look at me. He was just every little zipper pull, ka-chook, 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 ka-chook. His eyes were focused on those. Every click of the mechanisms and the things hooking together, his eyes were focused on those. And it really hit me. This is the Super Bowl for all of us, not just the crew, but the whole team of people that are preparing to pull this mission off. That part happens, you get on an elevator, you go down, you wave to some people, you get on a bus and you drive the bus out to the launch pad. It's about a 20-minute ride out to the pad, and not a lot of talking on the pad. We had a few launch scrubs for weather, but the first attempt, it was middle of the night. The shuttle was illuminated by these giant white lights, big halogen lights, and as the bus turned to go up the hill to the launch pad, you could see that thing just right there. Normally at the launch pad, it's a bustle of activity, hard hats and forklifts and pickup trucks and people and just noise. Launch day, none of it. Completely quiet. The only vehicle going to it is the bus you're in. Everything else is gone. And then the bus stops, and I remember the 7 of us got out and looked up, and it just kind of, wow, we're getting in that thing. Because the fuel is super, super cold, that cold fuel interacts with the moist, humid Florida air, causes the metal to moan and groan kind of, and you hear these sounds. It just is entirely different experience on launch day when the vehicle is fully fueled. You get in the elevator, you ride the elevator up, and one by one you climb in and buckle into the thing, to the capsule. A buddy that you know high fives everybody, closes the door, and now you're sitting there for a couple hours. It's really hard to be super serious for about 2.5 hours. You're in there for about 2.5 hours before launch. Our crew, we had just watched the movie Talladega Nights the night before, so there was a whole lot of Ricky Bobby going on in the cockpit. But you get to about 30 minutes before launch, and that humor goes away, and now you're very focused. You've got a lot of switch throws to do. And at one point, there's this thing called a T-minus 9-minute hold, which is a distinct period of time where the ground teams can assess all the health and wellness of everything, including the weather. And we're listening into the T-minus 9 hold as the flight director in Houston is going around the room to hit the people asking their go for launch. And we know their voices, we know them as people. Our kids go to school with their kids. And you hear the flight director say, here we go for launch. FIDO, go. Prop, go. ADCO, go. Weather, which is the one always, go. And I remember at that point, like, wow, we are going to space. This is unbelievable. Come out of the 9-minute hold. At 5 minutes, you close and lock your visor. Now you can't talk to anybody except on the radio. You just hear this hum of a fan, and you hear the radios squawking every now and then. At 30 seconds, the onboard computers take over, which there's physically an umbilical cord plugged in from the ground to the vehicle at that point, up to then, where it's driving the computers, but when they yank it out, all the displays kind of wiggle and jiggle as the computers switch data paths, which is not modeled. I talk about it because it's not modeled in the simulator. So I remember, whoa, what is this craziness as the screens all went wonky. And then at T-minus 6 seconds, we light the shuttle main engines, give the computer a few seconds to assess health and wellness of those engines. If their things aren't right, it closes a valve to stop the flow of fuel and you don't go. Coming down to 6, 3, 2, 1, explosive bolts release. These big, massive bolts holding the whole entire thing to the structure, and the solid rocket motors ignite, and you go flying off the launch pad. And the whole ride is about 9.5 minutes long. You feel 3.5 times the force of gravity pushing you in. It feels like a big gorilla pushing you on your chest. If you're a pilot's in the crowd, if you pull back on the stick, the direction of those G-forces are thrown down your head, which induces blackout. Our seats are oriented where the direction of the pressure is into your chest, so we don't pass out, but it is a little hard to move your arms and breathe a little bit, but you don't pass out. And the whole ride up goes by, and then the engine's cut off, and you're in space. And the first time I saw Earth from that viewpoint was shortly after that moment. My job was to take pictures of the external fuel tank, and if you remember, the Space Shuttle Columbia came to a catastrophic end of mission because on launch, chunks of foam came off the tank and hit the wing, which they didn't know about necessarily until reentry when it had the end that it did. So from that we learned, okay, if you can assess the tank and know that there's no chunks of foam missing, then you can be reasonably sure that your structure is intact on the shuttle. So that was my first job, was to take pictures of the external fuel tank, and I'd rehearse it in my head. Engines cut off, gloves off, helmet off, seatbelt, camera, window. And that's exactly what I did, not realizing anything other than this big orange thing in the camera viewfinder. And I'm taking all these pictures, like 2 minutes of pictures, and then it says change the camera lens. And I changed the camera lens and let the camera down, and I realized that the Straits of Gibraltar were behind that external fuel tank, and we were about 30 minutes into the mission, and we're going, as I said, you're seeing it pass by at 5 miles a second. I realized, holy cow, half hour ago we were at 0 feet of altitude, at 0 knots of velocity in Florida, and here we are over the Straits of Gibraltar, and it really puts the speed and impressiveness of the engineering all into perspective as you get that viewpoint. The other thing, from sort of a human point of view, from that view, is you just see Earth behind it. You see blue and green and brown and white swirly clouds. You don't see the traffic on 121 that I drove to from Keller from here, and none of that. You just see Earth. And it's pretty cool to see it as one place. It makes you really appreciate Earth as it is. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but I'll go into a little bit on the Medal of Honor Museum that we're building here, and then we can move into the questions. So in the summer in 2020, it was my last mission on the space station. I was up there for 6 months, and I knew that it was pretty much time to retire from the military. So as most of you know, unless you're a flag officer, you're pretty much limited to 30 years of service. And I was at 28, and I knew it was time to retire militarily. Had the option to convert over as a civil servant and remain at NASA as an astronaut, but it had been a wonderful career there. I was I think I was 51 years old at the time, and realized now if I'm going to do something else post-military, now's the time to do it. So kind of made the decision while I was in space, when I get back, I'm going to move on from the government and try something else. So as I got to the ground, my good friend, who is a board member of the Medal of Honor Museum Foundation right now, he and I were SEAL teammates, SEAL trainees together back in 1993. And so we've known each other for a long, long time, and he knew I was getting out of the military, and he called me and said, hey, what are you going to do when you leave the Navy and NASA? And I was like, I don't know, just work on my putting, work on my short game. I don't know, I don't have a plan, but I don't really care. And he said, no, seriously, would you consider coming to North Texas and help us with the Medal of Honor Museum? At that point, I was kind of thinking, as most people in aerospace or the space program, it's very natural to go work in one of the big engineering, big national defense firms, Boeing, Lockheed, whatever, SpaceX. There's lots of different startup space companies. So I was kind of thinking that would be my path. So it was a little bit of a momentum shift when he asked me to consider a nonprofit. And I said, okay, yeah, sure, happy to come on up. I came from Houston, drove up I-45 one day and toured in Arlington, met the mayor there and a few other people involved with the project, and realized the importance of the mission, and also did a little self-reflecting, as most of us in this room have been through times in life where you have to there's an inflection point, you have a decision to make. And I realized, in that time frame, that my 17-year-old self would roll his eyes at this comment, but what I loved about wearing the uniform for 28 years, didn't matter what I was doing in the Navy, it was feeling of contribution to our country. And maybe some of you know what I'm talking about. And that meant a lot to me. And so I thought, and I'd been cautioned by some people that I respect and admire who had already retired, and said, just think about that, because that's a real thing, filling that hole in your gut, your heart, whatever. And it made sense at that point when I got introduced to the Medal of Honor Museum Foundation and realized, aha, this is a way to continue serving the nation just outside of the uniform and help bring a project to life such as this. And one of the first questions I asked was, you mean this thing, there's no Medal of Honor Museum in the country already? Like, shouldn't there be? And the Medal of Honor, can you click? The Medal of Honor, does that work? Click on it.
The Medal of Honor is awarded for bravery in combat to those who go above and beyond the call of duty.
Risking their lives to save others, overcoming incredible odds, often making the ultimate sacrifice.
We salute these extraordinary Americans. We will always be inspired by their heroism.
When you look at the Medal of Honor recipient, you're looking at someone who has demonstrated gallantry under impossible odds. You're looking at someone who's placed duty above self. You're looking at someone who understands the meaning of sacrifice in the most profound way. And you're looking at a person of integrity, fortitude, and patriotism. You're looking at honor. And these values must be preserved, protected, and passed on to future generations. And that is why the National Medal of Honor Museum is so important.
This museum is a monument to the very best of our country. The idea that as America is timeless, and the valor it takes to protect and defend this experiment in liberty, that too will live forever, right here in this museum.
We mark a milestone moment on this historic mission to inspire America. This place, the National Medal of Honor Museum.
A greeting to a historical moment in the life of our country and in the life of the Medal of Honor recipients.
We know that what we did to earn the medal is less important than what we do with it. It does not make us special, but it does allow us to do special things, and there is nothing we have ever done that's more special than this museum.
This place will commemorate and preserve the stories of selfless service and sacrifice.
It's all come together to build a museum in their honor.
The National Medal of Honor Museum.
On a mission to inspire America.
Yeah, next slide.
The Medal of Honor is
what I realized when I was talking to my friend is the horsepower that's behind this project. And my old job at NASA, we used to say, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. And when they told me how much we had to raise to build this thing, I was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do that? It's about $280 million. And so, but having the four former presidents here support us with, you saw a video message, and since President Bush lives in the area, he has attended several events, to include our groundbreaking, which was a year and a half ago in March of 22. Charlotte Jones is our chairperson, my direct boss, and then I'm in charge of the foundation staff. We're about 25 people or so. The Medal of Honor has been around, as was mentioned, since 1861. And since that time, few of you are in the room and are numbers of this 40 million people who have worn the uniform since then. And to give you an idea of how rare the medal is, 3,535 times it's been awarded. 19 people awarded it twice. They were in the Civil War when it was the only medal actually that was awarded. But so it's very, very rare, very elite. And there are 3 variants. The Army, the Air Force, and the Navy all have versions. The Navy medal is presented to the Marine Corps and Coast Guard people as well. And there hasn't been a Space Force Medal of Honor recipient yet, but they would get the Air Force variant if and when that's the case. So the history of it is quite unique. There's been in the Civil War, as I mentioned, it was the only medal. So a high percentage of that 3,500 number is from that time frame, and since then the criteria has gotten a little more refined, and now it's a very, very competitive process where the action needs to be observed by a couple living participants of the engagement, who then verify what they saw and then submit it up through the chain of command. And it's very, very uncommon to have it awarded quickly these days because of the nature of that process and quite lengthy review process. And it's usually several years. And there's often cases where it's delayed by decades because of really unfortunate views at the time about race, religion, background, that sort of thing, which then there's a review process to rectify all that. And other times where the medal just kind of got lost in the process and then gets re-reviewed later in time. We lost the last World War II Medal of Honor recipient, Woody Williams, not the summer we just had, but the one before that. And there is one remaining Korean War gentleman, the longtime Korean War gentleman, Hershey Miyamura. He passed away, and then earlier this year, Korean War gentleman was awarded the medal in a review process that I just mentioned. So he's the sole remaining Korean War veteran that has received the Medal of Honor. And then the balance, which there are 65 living human beings today, the balance of those are mostly Vietnam, with I think it's 18 or 19 from the global war on terror era. So that's the makeup of them. The General Brady, who was a Vietnam helicopter pilot, he was in that video. He jokes around and says, "We don't buy green bananas anymore." So most of them, over half of them, don't travel to events and function any longer. They're getting a little challenged mobility-wise and health-wise to support an event. So of those 65, we probably see 20 to 25 on any given time frame throughout the year. To the next slide there. The project itself is really threefold. The museum, the physical museum, is right there being constructed right there in Arlington. It's up and out of the ground. If you ever go pass by that particular area, you'll see it largely complete on the exterior. And as we're about 15 months from being open for visitors, March of 2025. Little known fact, March 25th every year is Medal of Honor Day. So that will be the day of our grand opening, March the 25th of 2025. Until then, this year, we're about to be in 2024, as you know, we'll complete largely the construction, the physical construction, by the start of maybe mid-football season next year. And then the museum people will come inside and turn it into an attraction, and will be open for business as the year kicks into 2025. So that's the physical structure right here. And then in that building will be housed our Leadership Institute. We realized last year we don't need to wait around for the building to be open in order for us to start our leadership programs. We have these people, we have these stories, and let's make use of it. So we're organized with 3 centers: a center for youth, a center for adults, and a think tank to bring together universities and ROTC programs. Those 3 centers. On the youth programs, we partnered through our partnership with the NFL and this company called EverFi. The NFL has a program called Character Playbook. It's existing in 27,000 classrooms already. And over the last year, we just bolted on a Medal of Honor module to that program, and that is now in those same classrooms right now this calendar year. And we're working separately with a consultant company to develop our own standalone online program. The online programs is how we reach the nation. Of course, we'll have local programming for high schools in and around DFW. Our research shows that if you get beyond 50 miles from a location, it's a little hard for schools to come participate in your in-person program. So fortunately, from Arlington, you draw 50 miles, you get a lot of school districts, which we're pretty excited about. On the adult programs, we've had 2 one-week-long programs where we've brought 25 people from all different industries, mid-career, maybe 30 to 40-year-old people, to a 5-day program, all centered around the values of the Medal of Honor and Medal of Honor recipients participating in the curriculum, taught and moderated by professional staff. So we're pretty excited about the Leadership Institute. And the third aspect of the project is a monument in Washington, D.C. Most people say, hey, this is a national museum. Why the heck isn't it in Washington, D.C.? Well, we thought about that long and hard. It's really, really competitive and expensive and costly in time to put a museum in D.C. Where's the real estate? How do you do it? The quagmire of processes with the Congress for the mall, the National Mall. So that's why the museum, we decided to put that somewhere else in the country. It got down between Denver and here, and obviously DFW was the selected slot. And then a monument in D.C. Our legislation is it's already passed through the House, and we're hoping it in the Senate soon after the holiday break. And that the wording is that passed through the House is the monument will be within 1,000 feet of the Lincoln Memorial. If you draw 1,000 feet around Abe, You get around a third of the reflecting pool, kind of cut a little bit of the Vietnam monument side, and I think Korea monuments on the other side. And then part of that circle is in the river and catches some of the other side. So we'll be somewhere in there. There's about 5 or 6 defined sites in that perimeter, and so that's where the museum the monument will be. Timing wise, we'll complete construction here in 2025, as I mentioned, and then begin construction in Washington, D.C., mostly so that the same staff is not overtaxed and we're not trying to fight a battle in two fronts, so to speak, fundraising and in terms of staff resources. So that's the overall concept there. To the next one. Groundbreaking was a year and a half ago, March of 22. We're open in 25. It was a wonderful ceremony. Go ahead to the next slide. That's what it looks like a couple week or so ago. You can see the building. The architect have this amazing concept. I think it's amazing, where the museum itself is a suspended block by 5 giant pillars. Each of those pillars represents a military branch of service that's had a Medal of Honor associated with it, and it's about it's 200 by 200, that upper block. So that's where the museum deck is, and then it'll ultimately be subterranean, where you see these structures here. This will all be filled in with grass, and that'll be a parade field where we can have events and functions and JRTC graduations and the like. To the next slide. As I mentioned, the monument, in 2021, we passed unanimously, I didn't mention this, but in 2021 we passed unanimously to be authorized to be located on the monument, and the legislation that's before Congress right now is exactly where. So it's the where part that's a final step in the process. Go ahead to the next slide. There's the Lincoln within 1,000 feet. I mentioned that. To the next one. Institute, as I briefly said, we've got a Center for Character Excellence. That's the youth program. Center for Leadership in Action is the adult training programs that we'll be offering. And then the Center for Elevation of Honor is really a way to bring ROTC units, service academies, and other organizations that are exploring the same concepts as honor, courage, commitment, and that sort of thing. Next slide. This is the flagship course, the 25 people that we had come from these different companies in the last session was a couple months ago. Next slide. We're really proud of the fact that we've most of the way there in our fundraising. We raised $242 million. We've got $34 million to go, which is on the back 9 of the golf course, but those are the hardest holes to hit, I think. So we're chipping away. We're really excited about that, and I think that might be the last slide. Lots of several different companies have contributed. Up until about a year ago, it was all private families and family offices, and then and about a year ago is when corporations sort of were out of their post-COVID processes and back to normal, and so now we've been able to engage with companies and corporations now and get some money from them. The first public money that we received, we're about to get in early 2024, and that's from the state for education. We got some money from the Education Administration in Texas out of the last Congress, and so that will help with our youth programs. And I think that's all the slides. Why don't we open it up for questions on any of that stuff? Easy. Okay. I'll drive back to Keller. Oh, Captain Melillo, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So my wife has heard me tell, she had heard me tell this Captain Melillo story tens and tens of times. And then right before my last launch in 2020, we were having a party for my closest friends and family. As I mentioned, I'm from New England, so we were doing it in Boston. And we're there, we're driving to the party, and she kept on asking me, what are you going to say to the people? What are you going to say? I'm like, I don't know. They're all my friends. I'm just going to tell them, love you, see you, bye, see you in 6 months. He goes, no, you should tell the Captain Malillo story. So I did, and right when I got to the punchline about if it wasn't for Captain Malillo, she stopped me. This is just 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. She stopped me and said, hold on, Chris. Captain Malillo, will you please stand up? She had tracked him down and found him. I had never seen him since that moment when I was 17 years old. And it was kind of weird because I knew everybody in the room, 250 of my closest friends and family. I'm like, who the hell's that guy? And it was Captain Malillo, and so he got to participate as part of the launch, and we've been friends since. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I've got a question for you. So I really enjoyed your comments on your time as a NASA astronaut. So, we landed on the moon in '69. The last shuttle mission was 2011. We're talking about decommissioning the space station. What do you think the future of manned spaceflight is? Is that something we're going to pursue as a national priority?
That's a great question. And tied to that, people often ask, does NASA, the government, see SpaceX and these commercial entities as competition or no? The answer to that is absolutely not. The low Earth orbit is where the space station is, about 250, 300 miles above the surface of the Earth. And that's really where the viable business cases are for these commercial companies, SpaceX, Boeing, all the ones, there's lots of them out there now. And their success allows our government programs to do the longer, harder, more expensive missions, which is going to Mars. And the Mars astronauts I don't think are astronauts yet. They're probably in middle school or maybe even younger than these guys, just because it's going to take a little while for all that infrastructure to get ready. But what will enable that to happen is commercial companies being successful like they are right now in the lower Earth orbit area where the space station is. So I think that's the long-term vision. They'll also be in low Earth orbit. It sounds kind of crazy right now, but right now commercial space travel is available, but only to people that can write a humongous check to do it. And if you think back when just shortly after Orville and Wilbur had their flight, those early transcontinental flights were for the super wealthy also. Now none of us think about flying to California to see friends or family, and I think that will be the case. I don't know what the number of years is, but a decade, 5 decades, longer, I don't know, but where there'll be commercial travel to the International Space Station. You want to go to Hawaii for Christmas? No, Dad, we went there last year. Let's go to the space station. Okay, all right, let's go to the space station. I think that sounds funny, but it actually will happen, and it's because of the success that's going on right now in the commercial space world.
Why were you awarded your Bronze Star?
Oh, it's a good question. You probably don't remember this name, but there was a place called Tora Bora, which is a mountainous area on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and bin Laden was traipsing around in there in the early post-9/11 time frame. I was a member of SEAL Team 3. We were just, life is interesting in timing, and our platoon was ready to deploy at Thanksgiving time of 2001. And when 9/11 happened a month early, and so we deployed to Afghanistan post 9/11 by a couple of weeks, and running around those hills and mountains trying to find him. And there was a mission that involved a bunch of days in a huge cave area that our team was. So longer story than that, but that's where it was.
Chris, let me ask you this. I've got 2 questions. First of all, you and I have been at half a dozen events together over the years since you've been here. I just wondered, all that you've done. When I first met you and found out that you'd been a cadet in Annapolis at the Naval Academy, then you became a Navy SEAL, then you became an astronaut. Now you're the CEO of the Medal of Honor Museum that's being built in Arlington. I just wondered, you've got kids, right? Okay, so your wife, your kids. your grandkids someday. I just wondered, when you're long gone, with all that you have done, it's really most impressive. And I just wondered how you'd like to, maybe number one, what you're proudest of, and number two, how you want to be remembered. What's your legacy? What's the legacy?
That's a good question. The second question first, what I'm most proud of is in SEAL training, the class votes on what they call the honor graduate, and the instructors and the class members. And in my SEAL training, I received that award, the honor graduate from SEAL training. And that is the thing I'm most proud of anything, not because I can run and swim, but because my peers and instructors believed in me, and that is something that has meant a lot to me ever since that graduation day. And then the first question, when we select astronauts, we get all these applications and they come flying into NASA and we review them and we have interviews and we pick people, and at the end of the day we get a couple hundred people that are really smart and talented and can do all these different things, and then we meet them, and one of the main questions is, would we want to fly in space with that person? And flying in space is like going camping, or like driving from El Paso to Beaumont. It's like, you don't want to do it with somebody that you don't like. And so that, to me, is a thing that I want to remember, is I was somebody that my friends, family, loved ones, teammates wanted to drive from El Paso to Beaumont with.
That makes sense. Okay, the second question, and I usually, when we're here for these things, I usually ask the group that has shared all their incredible information with us, what is our duty? What is our take home? What can every single one of us in this room do as we look up there and see a Medal of Honor Museum Foundation coming to Arlington, Texas? It's going to be in our backyard. We're going to go to a Rangers game. We're going to go to a Cowboys game, whatever. We're going to be right there. I mean, you're in some pretty solid company. A World Series champion, former Super Bowl champions. How would we go out and share, or what would you like us to do to be the take-home from here, to share with our friends and neighbors about how we need to stay involved or get involved with the Medal of Honor Museum?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is help us spread the word. It is a national museum. It happens to be located in Arlington, Texas. It happens to be located in our state, but it is for the nation. And so that's one of our big jobs as a staff, is to get that message out. But why? Why would you get that message out? And there's other venues and museums where you can learn about military history, where you can go to New Orleans and get all the rich history of World War II. You can go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and see every flying machine that ever made. That's not what our museum is going to be. Our museum is going to be about the stories of normal Americans that did something extraordinary when the nation needed them to do it, and who those people were, and rich storytelling of their whole life, and in some cases their pre-service time frame was super fascinating. In some cases it's the what did they do post award of the medal. We've all probably flown into O'Hare Airport. Butch O'Hare, Medal of Honor recipient. You know, there's just one thing that came to my mind, but it's about the stories of normal people who did something extraordinary. And our take-home message when a visitor comes through, and this is our guiding principle as we bring this museum to life, is how do we inspire people, because most of us aren't going to be on the battlefield and have the opportunity to get the Medal of Honor, but all of us have challenging times in our day, in our life, in our week. And is there some part of a story that resonates to the museum visitors, how they can apply that inspiration in what a tough conversation with your boss or your spouse or your kid or whatever, any of those things. So that's really the why. And if you help us share that message, it'd be wonderful.
Good.
Chris, I'd like to ask you a question. Many years ago, when I first reported my first ship, my commanding officer had received the Medal of Honor. 30 years later, he was in Gainesville for their annual Medal of Honor parade, and I got the opportunity to go up there, sit down, and unexpectedly got invited to sit and have lunch with 13 Medal of Honor recipients. Truly a distinctive pleasure. My question is two parts. How are you going to coordinate, and what are you going to do with the Gainesville Parade, which is done annually? And are you intending to bring all the living Medal of Honor recipients back for the opening, and how long, and what are the activities that they're going to participate in?
Yeah, a grand opening of our museum, as I mentioned, in March of 25, all of them are invited. Like I mentioned, a big percentage don't really travel anymore, but the most we've ever had an event like this last November, the Cowboys Salute to Service home game, we had 16 folks there, and at our groundbreaking we had 19, I think it was 19 was the number. So we'll have some number like that, and they, I don't have an itinerary for you that day, but we'll do things for the community so that the community can enjoy and appreciate the fortune of having that many people in one location. I think gone are the times when people like you described can sit down with 13 Medal of Honor recipients. They're just, that's a very precious memory that's hard to replicate anymore given the population of the recipients these days. And then in Gainesville, just up the road, they have a parade. I forget the month every year, but they host Medal of Honor recipients in Gainesville, and they have a small museum there as well, and we're working out how we can partner and have events and coordinate activities since we're so close to each other.
Question for you, sir, regarding your youth program. How do you plan to bring the children in? Are you going to be appealing directly to schools, or are you going to be running summer camps?
No, we don't want there to be any barriers to entry for schools to participate in. Transportation, busing, food is something that we've learned is costly for a school, and they can't just willy-nilly send 10 buses somewhere. So your question is spot on. For that particular reason exactly, we are starting an education fund, part of our fundraising efforts, so that will endow the transportation costs, mostly for the DFW area schools. And they just need to coordinate with us, and we'll have that plan, probably a year out in advance for the schools to come.
Summer camps?
Probably summer camps. It's a little too early for me to say. I think having summer camps makes a lot of sense, but quite truthfully, we haven't put any thought to what exactly that would look like.
Question here. My name is Chuck Chamberlain. I'm an aging Army guy. This is not a Medal of Honor question. This is probably the first question that you'll probably won't say, that's a good question. But
well, you're an Army guy, so I can say that.
Yeah. Well, it's even worse than that. But I've been addicted to the SEAL training of what all you all have done. And my wife and I, in our aging, we kind of get stuck watching TV more often than we used to, but we're addicted to SEAL Team. And so in a serious moment, I'm going to ask you, is Hollywood doing you all justice in these type of things? Because we love that program, but I think, is that as close as you come to the kind of life day-to-day that the SEAL Team will go through?
I think for any TV or movie, there's some level of drama that needs to be induced to give it the twists and turns that are required for a watchable show. I think that all of the media that's out there about the SEAL teams has definitely helped us with recruiting. I am not personally a huge fan of how widely known SEALs are. When I graduated high school, nobody knew what a SEAL guy was, and now you can't swing around in Barnes & Noble without knocking over 15 SEAL guy books. But I do like the shows. I just think that there's a certain element of drama that gets induced that, it's got to be there, so I don't fault the show producers, but it's not necessarily how day-to-day life is in the SEAL teams. And I think that they portray a much more cavalier, don't care about rules kind of organization, which is the case that I experienced. It's a military unit with order and discipline. There's bad apples in any organization that make the news and different things, but that's the only part I don't like.
Yeah, I have a question. So you mentioned that the space shuttle can only stay in space for 2 weeks at a time. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, it's all limited by how much oxygen we could take. The shuttle generates electricity by combining hydrogen and oxygen and make electricity and water. So how much capacity that is works out to be about 2 weeks. Even though we're on board the space station, in theory we can connect a cable and power from the space station. It's still, you only eke out a day or two more from that. Yeah. Young man.
How did being accepted into Navy prep school and being inside of it change and reflect your values to teach those my age at this table and the table over there?
Oh, good question. So when I got accepted, when Captain Mullo first told me I went to the Navy prep school, after initial excitement, I was disappointed that I didn't get directly in. But in hindsight, it took me a couple months to realize it was the best thing that ever happened to me. There's huge maturity difference between an 18 or a 19-year-old. You guys don't know that yet, but it's coming. And we took the same classes at prep school that we took freshman year at Navy. So I was just set up for success in a far better way, having had that 1 year of prep behind me. And also, more to your question, exposed me to military values and what it means to be a good teammate, what it means to be disciplined with your time. When you go to a service academy or lots of things in life, you have to prioritize time and you have to be smart about how you use it, or you could be overwhelmed. And the prep school really taught me that in a nice way. I'll keep on talking. I don't want to keep everybody too long, but.
Right. How are you planning to advertise this to the general public?
The museum?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So we have a marketing team that's doing that right now, but additionally, we actually just signed a contract with an operating partner who is going to run the museum, sell the tickets, sell the rental space in there. You can have weddings or graduations or commissioning ceremonies. And that company will be our primary marketing arm. In addition, we have stood up right now, a veterans network that you can sign up for. Anybody can, it's free. And that's by word of mouth through veterans is another method that we're using. Yeah.
We got one more.
One more question.
I'm a former Army officer and a high school teacher. I don't need a microphone.
You don't need it, no.
So, I serve my country 2 ways. When I retire in June, are you going to have an advisory committee of teachers? Because I teach AP World History, I teach social studies, we use first-person accounts. Primary source history is one of the best ways to do it. And if you don't have an advisory committee of teachers, you're going to need one. And I would love to know how to apply for that.
Yeah, let's link up after this because you're spot on, and we know we need that. It's just now becoming evident to us, and we're now at the point where we can start really thinking about it. So let's connect afterwards. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Appreciate your time.
So, thanks for I got to read the script. So, Chris, thanks for your comments and your update on the status of the museum. We're incredibly lucky to have this museum here. I was served in a squadron with one of the Medal of Honor winners, who I knew personally. He was an instructor of mine at one point in my career, so it's right on schedule. Anyway, I think we'll all leave tonight with a lot more knowledge about the museum and also its